Welcome to the Alchemist Inkwell.
This is your spiritual podcast for grounded people.
I'm Emily.
And I'm KristaLyn. And today we have an amazing guest. Everybody give it up for Nicole Lintemith. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how awesome you are.
Well, I don't know about that part, but I'm Nicole Lintemith. I own an independent bookstore in Lowell, Michigan, which is a pretty small town in West Michigan. So if you're looking at your hand, it's like side of the Palmish area. And we opened in February of 2020, exactly 1 month before the state of Michigan shut down for the pandemic. So the entire time we've been open, we've been navigating like one disaster after another. But luckily I am neurodivergent, I have ADHD, and my brain does really well with chaos. So it's actually kind of worked well for me. And so I survived a pandemic, then there was a global uprising and all of these structural racism conversations happening. And now we're having tons of conversations about banned books. And I'm here for all of those conversations and being a part of that.
Well, we absolutely love what we've seen so far. By the way, you can find Nicole on TikTok. What's your handle so everybody can follow you?
Yep, it's Betties Pages, BettiesPages.
Okay, because you are covering such important things and you're doing it in a bright way. You're doing it in a way that's like, I feel empowered to do something and I don't feel like I'm incapable of making change. I feel like this actually, it's like watching a Disney show. If you've ever gone to Disney World and like watched Fantasmic or something like that, afterwards you're like, I can save the world. And I really get a similar feeling after watching your TikToks. And it's like, I have steps that are tangible and actionable and I can do something to help this, which is fantastic. So thank you for that already. And I can't wait to talk a little bit more about what you do just in general, the things that you're passionate about, and of course, books, because Emily and I love high vibe fiction, high vibe books, and you seem to have that really nailed down too. So this is going to be great.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it would be really helpful, I think, if you wouldn't mind giving our listeners just an understanding of briefly what is going on with the banned books thing, because I know it has been a lot of stuff that's come up. And as Krista mentioned, we really like your approach of like, it's something that we can actually handle. We've been talking about it forever, but I think a lot of people don't even fully understand like what banned books are, what's going on with them right now. And before we dive into like the magical, like high vibration side of stuff, I feel like let's talk a little bit on the tangible bit, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, the nuts and bolts. So banned and challenge books have been, as long as there have been books, there have been people who have not liked certain books and have decided that people shouldn't have access to them because they don't like them personally. So banned and challenge books happen in public spheres, public libraries, school libraries, things like that, where individuals will come in and say, I don't want XYZ book on the shelf because I'm offended by it, or I think it's inappropriate, or I just don't like it. And then when a person does that, that book is then challenged. How the library responds will decide if that's going to be a challenge book or if it's going to actually be banned. Most often what happens is when people come in and challenge the book, libraries are fabulous. I'm such a fan of libraries and librarians and the work that they do. They know their rights. They know the First Amendment. They know that they're on the front lines of protecting those rights for all of us. And so they'll tell that person like, you don't have to read the book, that's fine, but we're going to keep it available for other people. So it'll be considered a challenge book at that point. If the person is successful in getting the book taken off the shelf, then it becomes a banned book because it's no longer in that library. And there's some kind of like middle ground too, where a person may challenge a book and that library may decide that they're gonna pull it off the shelf. It'll still be in the collection, like if a person asks for it specifically, but it won't be displayed anymore. So that's kind of a middle ground that sometimes will happen. And the American Library Association tracks all of these that happen in the United States. It is a self-reported system though. So we do understand that probably about 80 to 90% of challenges and bans actually never get reported because the people most likely to report challenges are the ones who are fighting back against it. Because, you know, like any group of humans, there are people who are not going to be supportive of these kinds of books. So they're going to agree with the people who are challenging it and be like, yeah, let's get rid of that book. And then they're not going to report that. And in the last year, starting in the summer of 2021, we've seen a really concerted effort across the country in schools in particular, but also in public libraries, of groups coming in with lists that are all very similar of what books they want to have challenged or banned in their school districts or in their public libraries. And so you've seen a lot of action at local school board meetings, even in my own community. Like these are happening everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're in a blue state or in a red state or a big city or a small city. It is literally happening in school districts all over the country right now, where they're showing up, and we call them dramatic readings at our school board meetings. We're like, oh, I wonder what dramatic reading we're going to get today. and they'll come in and they'll read like a paragraph out of a book that's designed to outrage as many people as they can, completely out of context, completely without any, information about this book, and then say, how dare they have this, pornography in our kids' classrooms or in these libraries. And then, the spiral kind of continues. And so you're seeing a lot of that. A Tennessee school district just recently banned Mouse, which is a graphic novel about the Holocaust, because it was inappropriate and had nudity. Never mind that these are mice, that, apparently the nudity of these mice is inappropriate for high schoolers to be reading. And so you're seeing just a lot of news stories about this right now and a lot of talking conversations about this, which is great, because then people are being aware of it and they're pushing back against it and standing up for these books' rights to exist and having discourse about why they're so important.
Yeah. I love that you brought attention to the fact that librarians really are protecting that right in so many ways.
Yes.
Librarians are the most badass people on the planet.
They're
and I'm 100%
superheroes.
certain of that.
I bow down to them. Like I own a bookstore. It's an indie bookstore, and we don't see librarians or libraries as competition. We're like, no, libraries are dope. You should support them. They're like just the most amazing spaces that we have in a capitalistic society, where you can just go and exist for free. You don't have to spend money there. You can be there for as long as you need. They provide so much. I could talk for hours about how amazing libraries are. I love them.
Yeah, no, they really are. And especially when it comes to stuff like banned books and like bringing that to attention, and all of the things that are happening in that space right now, it's so essential to call out the librarians that are doing the work to stop. I'm also the daughter of a librarian, so I'm biased, but still.
Not biased, if you're correct. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm not biased if I'm right. But I would like, what, on that note, to kind of like phase into that, like the value that we have in books as teaching implements, and also just to help people see perspectives that are not their own, is so essential. And I guess the question in that for you, I guess, is like, where do you see, especially running a bookstore, how do people respond to not just the banned book stuff going on, but like a lot of the new wave of higher vibration, like fictional stories that are trying to teach and educate, and those spaces? How are people showing up from what you've seen in those zones?
It's amazing. So there's kind of like two veins of it. There's the first vein where people are finally getting to see themselves reflected in fiction and in books and in media in general. And just the relief and the amazing feeling of getting to see that people have. Like, I get emotional. I'm queer. I'm bi. I grew up in a very small town in the 90s. I had no language for who or what I was. And I just thought I was a freak who was the only one who was like this. And it wasn't until I was in my later teens and had access through the internet to finally be like, oh, I'm not a freak. There's language for this. Like, I'm not the only person. And now, like, getting to see kids having books that explain gender identity and different sexualities and different experiences that people have, and knowing that these kids are going to be raised with that, I get super emotional. Like, I have a passion for kids' books, and I'll read them and I'll be just sobbing when they come in. Cause I'm like, knowing what a difference that would have made for me as a kid. And now kids growing up get to actually experience that and see that. So that whole vein is just amazing. And then the other vein is like, I'm a white woman who grew up in a very small town in the Midwest. I had zero exposure or experience with people from other cultures or other countries or other lived experiences. And now through like these diverse medias and diverse fiction, you get to experience that. You get to learn from that. You get to ask questions and have these kind of exposures in a really safe way that you can't have in other ways. Like, even media, like through online and movies and stuff like that, never has quite the same impact as experiencing people's stories written through books and graphic novels. You get to see like the inside thoughts that are in people's heads as they're going through these books and things like that. That just creates a lot of empathy and like exposure to these ideas and these people that you wouldn't normally have. And that's creating conversations for people who are like, I never thought of that. I never experienced that. And they're kind of unpacking their own privileges and their own understandings of like their prejudices and stuff like that. And that's just such like a powerful thing that's so cool that we get to see happening right now. And I love that.
I couldn't agree more. I grew up in Pennsylvania, coal town. So small town, not a lot of exposure outside. You know, there was an hour and a half away for 2 generations back was like a big vacation that you went for multiple days and things connected to that. So until I had the privilege of being able to take international trips, my way of learning was through stories. And my parents did a great job with exposing me to different stories and giving me that opportunity. But even in school,
Yeah.
reading To Kill a Mockingbird, reading different things that gave you different perspectives and gave you a lens, a glimpse into how the world worked at the time that it was written. It's just an incredible slice of life, wherever that book is from, that I really love the way that you can travel in a sense just by reading. And I don't think that's replaceable.
No, it is amazing, just the power of being able to literally never leave your house and travel the world and experience different times and different places and different people. And I'm so amazed at being in this it's time in the world where we're getting to see more people writing their own stories, which I think is so important, and getting to share their own lived experiences that they've gone through, which is so different than reading books. You know, even like when I was growing up, you got to see other cultures or experiences, but it was always through like a white lens and or a male lens talking about, you know, women's experiences, or and there was literally no, you know, queer representation at all. And so getting to see like everybody sharing their own stories is really, really awesome.
Even getting to see people reading those texts, like there's this one audiobook narrator that takes women written by men, and she'll do her audiobook voice with it. And at the end, because it's usually a little bit out there, she just gives a look to the camera, and everybody who knows. It's definitely one of those, if you know, you know, this is not how it goes. Like that person didn't do the research in that case. And you can do research, you can do this opportunity for immersion through these books. And I really love that. Do you have any like favorite stories that you're particularly into right now?
Oh, that's like picking a favorite child. It's so hard. I have so many. I'm really into graphic novels. They were not a thing when I was growing up. Like comic books were a thing, but it was a very niche. And graphic novels had not yet really become mainstream like they are now. So when I opened the store, I really started like diving into them, and I am obsessed. I can't get enough of them. So, you know, books like A Girl from the Sea, which is like a Selkie myth retelling that has just amazing representation. New Kid, which is a book by Jerry Craft that's been Vander challenged in Texas a lot for having CRT content, which does not actually exist in the book. It's literally just a book about a Black kid going to school. And I'm just fascinated by them because getting to see like the art paired with the text is just, it's just a whole experience that I'm really into right now.
Speaking of that, just side note, did you get to see the Heartstopper trailer on Netflix?
Oh my God. My coworker and I, we were like talking about how like we're just gonna take a holiday on April 22nd and we're just gonna binge
the whole
Heartstopper
thing
because I don't want to come to work that day. yeah.
I'm gonna be in Pennsylvania
one of my
with
favorites.
Krista. Yeah, I'm gonna be in Pennsylvania with Krista during that time. So when I get back, I'm like, or on the plane, I'm gonna be like, let's just watch this.
Yeah,
we can watch it here too.
Yeah, it's because that one's it's beautiful. It's a for those listening, it's a queer graphic novel, and it's just
the sweetest love story. It's so beautiful. The things that they like, the topics that they tackle in that one are just like I have such a passion for kids and YA books because they really treat kids and teens like humans who can understand things and can really understand a lot more than they usually get credit for. And the topics that they'll cover and the conversations that they'll have in them are just, oh, it's so amazing.
On that note, what inspired you to open a bookstore? Like where did this come in? And especially like you opened it obviously in your divine timing, and I just want to highlight that like energetically it was the right time for you to do this, especially with who you are as a person and the topics you're dealing with. But also like it takes a lot of energy and gumption to start a bookstore. So how did you get there?
So I grew up in like I said, in a really small town. We didn't have a bookstore. Our library was the high school library. That also was our county library. It was very small. The nearest bookstore was like an hour and a half away. And so I never grew up with that. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, it'd be so cool to open a bookstore, but like, who does that? Like there's online shopping and all these other, like, who does that? So I, went to college, worked in nonprofits for a little while, and then ended up in banking, which was a very like practical, very I loved it. I was great at it. I enjoyed a lot about it. And I got this job where my title was great. I got paid great money and I hated everything about it. I was miserable. The first time in my life, I was like, I don't want to go to work. Like, I hate this. I lived for the weekends. And so just doodling, I just kind of wrote a business plan because I'm the type of person who just writes a business plan for fun. And I shared it with my friends and I shared it with my husband. And they were supposed to be like, oh, that's cool. how about you just go find another job somewhere else that you'll like more? But instead they're like, no, you need to do that. Like you need to open that, you go for it. And so my husband and I sat down and we figured out like, okay, can we make this work? Like opening a business is not cheap or easy. Like, is this going to be feasible for us? And I went for it and had just, we technically opened in January of 2020 at a location that was just meant to be temporary. And then on our 9th day, I walked into the store to 3 inches of water on the floor. It was like raining in the building. I had just quit my job. I had just opened this store and I just fell down on the ground and like started sobbing. Like I called my landlord, I called my best friend, and then I called my husband. And I was just a wreck. I was sobbing. I was like, this is it. Like everything's failed. I'm done. Like, what is wrong? Like I give up. Did not give up. Moved into my current location where I'm at now, opened a month later, pandemic hit. Thought, okay, here we go again. Like, what is happening here? So it has been one of those things where I say, like, that first year we had the flood, we had the pandemic, and then we had the summer of 2020. And I was like, okay, if I can survive that and have the business thrive and do well and find such a passionate like audience for it, I feel like I can survive anything. And it's just been amazing. Indie bookstores are thriving across the country. Like people are opening more indie bookstores in the last 5 years than had been opened in the, like 15 years prior to that. And we're seeing them really kind of responding to their community needs too, in a lot of like non-traditional ways. You'll have like pop-up indie bookstores or like book vans and like mobile bookstores that move, around their neighborhoods and meet people where they're at. So it's just like a really thriving industry to get into. It's a lot of hard work and I'll never get rich from it, but I love coming to work every day and I'm super passionate about it. Obviously.
Well, yeah. And we're talking a little bit about divine timing on that. It really is appropriate. Like so many people started businesses during the pandemic, and from like my first love language is astrology. So when I look at all these people who have started businesses, my husband, Emily, and I, we've done it. My husband opened a coffee and bookshop that's dog friendly. So kind of catching your vibe there a little bit. But the fact that so many people initiated during this closing of a cycle and beginning of a new cycle that was actually in January, believe it or not. I don't know if January 12th was a big day for you in your bookstore, but it was a big day in astrology. And there's this reemergence of wiping a slate clean and doing things differently, but having to, in this phase of it, be adaptable and having to, be a little bit lighthearted about it because we're just having fun figuring things out. And I really like that you've been able to do that. You've been able to really adapt with things, have fun with it. It really seems to appeal to your neurodivergence to be able to do this. And you seem to be able to master it and just roll with it so well.
I try.
It's also cool to see that really tangibly on all different levels of the book world. So Krista and I have talked about this on the podcast before, and in our business, we help people write their own books, right? Like that's like what we're doing. We're writing mentors with spiritual stuff and astrology thrown in. And it's so cool to be so into the publishing industry and seeing it like there's more indie bookstores opening and getting the books to the people is changing, but also getting the books published is totally changing with the like onset of more hybrid stuff with what Brandon Sanderson just fucking did with like all these different things. It's like that's changing too. And just getting to see that in the last 2 years, this massive shift, because I've been a part of the publishing industry for a very long time. And it's like finally new stuff and it feels so cool.
It does.
Such a big way.
Like such a dynamic time in the industry. Like you see a lot of big changes. You see a lot of new people like having their voices heard. You see a lot of people like getting involved who thought, oh, I could never do this or I could never be a part of it. And now people are like, fuck it, go for it. Try it, see what happens. And it's awesome.
Yeah, it's funny how it used to be this, there's an established way of doing things. You have to find your way in. It's all about who you know. And now it's like, I'm going to make my own path and I can now, which is just so cool. We're just redefining everything and there's a space for it. And, bookstores, publishing, writing, all of those things, all of the restrictive feelings seem to be at least going in a different direction. I mean, speaking from an astrological perspective, the way we define and, kind of establish our rules has been rewritten and is a little bit more mutable. Well, air.
So what is your bookstore called, by the way? We keep alluding to it, but we haven't like named it.
It's
my
called
gosh,
Betties Pages. Yeah. It's a pun off of Betty Page, who was a pinup artist in the 50s and 60s, which is like an aesthetic that I really love. And I love a good pun. I can't take credit for it. My best friend actually named it. So yeah, it's Betty's Pages.
Oh, how sweet. I love
Love
that.
that.
And do you do a lot of like, I know a lot of indie bookstores now are kind of going into the online space too, and like doing like author events and that sort of space. Do you guys do that as well?
Yeah, I mean, we really had to,
Yeah.
because we opened right before COVID and right at the shutdown. Indie bookstores have always really thrived as like a community space, having events, gatherings, being that kind of hub of information and events and just that space and a community. And because of the pandemic, what we all thought of as community really shifted. It was no longer just the people that you were physically around. It really became like finding your like-minded community wherever they ended up. And when I first opened, I had no intention of doing online sales, really anything online at all. I really wanted to kind of hone into being that space for my community. And then I didn't have a choice. Like I got thrown into the waters of figuring out, okay, I got to figure out how to get stuff online and I have to figure out all of these
Right.
things. And it worked really well. And the cool thing about it is now my community of supporters for the store is literally across the country. And I've always done really well on Facebook and Instagram. And then when I landed on TikTok, I was just like, I can't dance. I'm not going to do like these really elaborate things, but like I like talking about books, so I guess I'll do that. And I noticed that there was kind of a lack of people talking about particularly kids books. There was a lot of really great content creators doing YA, a lot of really great content creators doing adult books, but nobody was really having conversations about kids books. And a lot of us our age are having kids and they're wanting to find books that kind of reflect that. So I was like, all right, well, I guess that's what I'll talk about. And it kind of blew up, which was crazy. I did not expect that at all. And so yeah, I went viral, I think last summer with a series of books talking about like how to make people uncomfortable at like baby showers and birthday parties, like what books to bring. And people just really responded to that. And I was like, okay. So now I get to talk about kids books and really like really lean into my passions about diversity and having these kind of authentic voices in these books. And people are really responding to that. And it's really, really cool.
Yeah. So speaking of like online and also puns, you have this hashtag challenge your shelf.
Yes.
And I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So I knew I wanted to do a book challenge this year for the store. I was like, all right, this is gonna be my new thing. We haven't done one before. And I really wanted to come up with something that the whole family could get into. So we have all the different levels. And basically challenge your shelf is we pick a theme each month. And those are all up already for the whole year. And so our first one in January was Fuck Diet Culture. So it's all about body positivity and having books that kind of talk about, you know, what is, you know, fat phobia and all of these things and how can we kind of fight against it, and giving people the option of both a fiction book and a nonfiction book. And so I make recommendations every month for adults, for YA, for kids, and then for like babies, like picture book age. For those topics, a fiction book and a nonfiction book. And people can read those books or they can find their own book that kind of reflects the topic and talk about it. And then they kind of submit and we have these really great stickers. And if you get all 12 stickers at the end of the year, you can get a t-shirt. So we're really excited about that. And it has been amazing, like getting to see the conversations that people are having about these books and about these topics. So January was Fuck Diet Culture. February was Love Your Shelf. And it was all about self-love, consent, and topics that kind of respond around that. And then March, because it's Women's History Month, is all about girl power. And so having like these really cool topics and having options for people to get involved in them has been really neat, because a lot of people like don't like nonfiction. Personally, I love nonfiction, but not everybody vibes with that, and that's cool. So having a fiction option that still kind of really hones in on those topics and getting people to be able to be like, oh, I can read a fiction book and have these conversations still. It's so cool. I'm loving it so much.
That is
Yeah.
like our entire platform. We call that high vibe fiction because it's like fiction self-help. Is there a way that if people really want to jump in on this and it's the first time they're hearing about it, can they catch up?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have it on our website, and you can find all of the books that have been recommended for previous months. It's really cool about this challenge is it's like an at your own pace. So you can like read the whole year this month, or you can, you know, go back and read January's now in any order, whatever you want to do them. We don't give the recommendations until like a day or two before the month starts. So if you want to read our specific recommendations, then you got to wait until I post them. But all of the previous months are on there and it's really cool. And then if you're on Storygraph, which is a really great app that not enough people know about, it's like a great non-Amazon owned alternative to Goodreads. If you're on Storygraph, we have the challenge on there as well. So you can like follow the challenge there, and we post all of the books, and you can share which books you've been reading. And the cool thing is you can see what other books people have been reading too. So like other options that people have been reading, which has been really cool. Like I found a lot of really great books that way, which has been fun for me.
Yeah, I saw Jane Friedman posted about Storygraph recently, and I
Yeah.
haven't gone into it enough yet. But now that you've recommended it, I'm
Yeah.
interested.
It's really cool. It's still, it's still fairly new. So they're like constantly adding new things to it, which I'm really excited about. They've really started working on adding more of like the community aspects, which has been great. But it's cool because it's Black woman owned and created, and she's a reader, and like you can really tell that she has put a lot of thought into this app. Like you can do like half stars, and you can have like a do not finish, button, and like all of these things. And it's I love it. I brag about it all the time. It's so fun.
You just hit like the 5 points that I hate about Goodreads. Like I really struggle with Goodreads. It doesn't work with my own neurodivergency. It does not function with my brain. I don't like it. And so I just avoid it like the plague. And I'm an author, so I stay out of it that space too. I'm very anonymous on Goodreads. But like that sounds great because it drives me nuts.
Yeah. Storygraph is where it's at. I'm a big fan.
That's
Definitely
cool.
jumping into that. So another thing that I'd love to ask on behalf of myself and hopefully for listeners is what can we as individuals do to make a difference through the world, through what we read, through our bookshelf, to support the whole, if we have a passion or feel drawn to make a difference or speak out in the banned book community kind of topic, what would you recommend?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that you can do. The first biggest thing that you can do, start showing up to your school board meetings, because these are happening everywhere. And a lot of these people who are kind of advocating for banning books are hoping that people won't notice, and they're hoping they can fly on the radar, because let's be honest, not a lot of people think about going to their school board meeting because it's usually not very interesting or entertaining. But I highly recommend showing up to them and starting to go and paying attention, because these public comment times when people are just railing at school boards and railing about these books, they're getting so much negativity out there and so much negative attention to them, that when we show up and we have a positive thing to say, the school board is just so grateful. They're like, oh, thank God, somebody who doesn't hate us, like for once, which is really empowering for them. And, getting to have that voice in the community who's saying, look, not all of us want to ban these books. Some of us are very grateful for them, and having that is super, super important. So that's like my first recommendation to people: get involved in your local community, because it is absolutely happening there. The second thing is get involved with your library, especially with banned books. The library being able to show that these books are interested for their community, that people are checking them out, that people are reading them or requesting them if they're not there, gives them the power to kind of push back against these people who are trying to ban or challenge these books by saying, hey, look, you might not like it, but we've got this long list of people who are waitlisted to read this book, or who have requested this book, or who have read this book. And that's kind of just like a numbers game that they can be able to use as another kind of tool in their arsenal to fight back against these people. And then lastly, if you have the ability to purchase these books from indie bookstores particularly, but however you can, and showing support to these authors, they're getting a lot of hate from all of this. Like there's a lot of people who are very vocal and supporting and are finding out about these books, but they're dealing with a lot of just horrible things being said about them. People, who are saying that their books are pornography, or that they're indoctrinating people, or all of these things. And that wears on you after a while. And so supporting these authors and giving them the support by buying their books is like an amazing thing that you can do.
Yeah. And it is important to note, like, a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to buy a book. And they do think, I can't go to this bookstore or that bookstore, so I'll just go to Amazon. Like my nearest bookstore is an hour and a half plus away. But you can buy on indie bookstores' websites just as easy as Amazon. And it's not supporting the, Bezos's rocket. And that's really fun.
It is. And there's another alternative too, which is called bookshop.org. And it's a for good company. So what they do, they don't actually make any profit after they pay their, employees and their expenses. Everything that they make above that goes right back to indie bookstores. So you can support an individual bookstore on it by like searching like, hey, what's a bookstore near me? Or like, I want to find like an Indigenous owned bookstore or a Black owned bookstore, like whatever whatever you want to go for. And you can support that one specifically. But they do a pool, and every bookstore who's a part of bookshop.org, I'm one of them, they cut a check to us twice a year. And it's such a cool thing. And it has all of the convenience of shopping online and like, quick delivery, like all of those things. So if you like to shop online, but you still want to support indies, it's like the perfect kind of pairing of that.
Honestly,
But yes,
that
also
sounds
indie
perfect.
bookstores also have websites, and we like to sell and ship all over the country.
Yeah, you don't usually think about it because you think of an indie bookstore being more brick and mortar, but like they do both, and that's a really great reminder to have.
Yeah. This is just so good. If anyone out there listening, if you're struggling with a lot of the energy right now, because there's a lot of energy going on right now that is very, very dense and very challenging to navigate through, and it's presenting for people in a variety of different ways. Some people are like, it's great, everything is thriving, and other people are like, I can't get out of bed. All valid. Going to a bookstore is the best mental health reset you can possibly do, even if you're not a reader. And I stress this all the time because even if you're not a reader, everyone else in there is. And it feels so nice to just walk around and everyone's peaceful and you can smell pages and it's just
it's the best smell. Yeah,
it's the best smell. It's just fantastic. So I cannot stress enough, if you're struggling with mental health stuff, like just go to a bookstore, please. Like just for a little bit.
Like socializing without socializing, and you immediately get to skip small talk because you can tell who likes the stuff you like by what bookshelf they're at. So it's just this awesome thing, you know, speaking for people who are neurodivergent in various different ways, that small talk thing catches us. And I just love going into bookstores where it's people but comfortable silence, and the soft acknowledgement of boundaries and that kind of stuff is just there. So it's a very fantastic place to be, and usually there's coffee and that's nice too. So
it's a delight. I just love being in here. It was so hard when we had, gosh, it was probably about 5-6 months where we were closed to in person, like people couldn't come shop in person. It was awful. Like my store was a mess. Like I basically turned into like a shipping warehouse because I was doing everything, porch drop off or shipping or whatever, but there was just like no people in here. And I was like, I miss people. Like I just want, I'm not even much of a people person. Like I'm very much an introvert. So like for me to be like, okay, I'm missing people at this point. Like that's how you had gotten to the point where I was like, this is bad. So when we finally got to like reopen and have people in the space again, it was like, this is amazing. I love it.
That's awesome. Okay, a couple random book questions just because I always want to know whenever someone's bookish and there's not enough bookish people around me personally. What would be the book that you would recommend for someone to get into, whatever your favorite genre is? So whatever favorite place you like reading, what are you always like, ooh, you should start here?
Yeah, I'm a romance fanatic. That is my go-to genre every day, all the time. And so kind of my like entry points for that, the Brown Sisters trilogy by Talia Hibbert is phenomenal. It's funny. It's just the right amount of sexy that you're going to be like, ooh, but not like embarrassed to be reading. And it has just the most fantastic representation of so many different like intersections of disability and queerness and the Black experience and like all of these things. And it's just fabulous. So definitely that. Yeah, that's probably the one that I'm always like, this is start here, and then people get into the genre.
I love how like we always mention like reading embarrassment, especially when it comes, oftentimes people view it as like, oh, when you're reading like smut in public or something like that, you get embarrassed. But then also that is such an individual experience because no one knows you're reading it and you're just in your own head like, oh my God, I'm so mortified about this. The other day, just random like aside, I'm writing a book about a woman who was an actual poisoner in ancient Rome, and I'm writing her story as a historical fiction. And so I was doing research on ancient Rome, and I'm like getting into the part where they're talking about like sexuality in ancient Rome, and I'm in the fucking dentist office.
Oh yeah, it's wild. They were like,
whew. Right. But I was like, okay, this is fine. I can read it. It's just a book on ancient Rome. And then it started getting into like diagrams and like pictures and like all these different stuff. And I was like, I need to shut the book. Like no one can see, but that is such an individual, like universal experience that I always think is just hilarious in the book community. Because no one's judging what you're reading, but you think they are.
Right.
Absolutely. I had the same experience in the hair salon while reading The Mysteries of the Dark Moon. And on the cover is this abstract art of a lounging and very comfortable divine feminine female. And I was just like, I'm reading, but like the hand is in front of as much as I can because it's one of those spaces.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Romance is really fun too. We have people, because we'll talk about high vibration books all the time, and specifically high vibration fiction. Nonfiction can be very high vibe too, but high vibration helps you to realize something about yourself. It helps you to essentially heal something about you in some way. And people tend to be like, oh, so I can't read like romance anymore, or I can't read like horror anymore. It's like, no. no, that's not what we're saying in the slightest.
That is my jam, actually, is finding kind of these stories that people can relate to. And especially, this is part of why I love romance so much, is it is one of the most diverse genres that is out there. And they talk about so many important topics about mental health and racism and sexism and all of these things. And it is the one genre where the entire focus is on relationships between people and you get a happy ending at the end. And so people, especially like have recommended so much for romance in the last 2 years because everybody has been struggling. And I'm like, look, like you can still be working on yourself and working on opening your mind to things and enjoy what you're reading. Just do a little bit of work and find books by authors of color or by queer authors and read those and like enjoy those.
Yeah. And the amount of subgenres in romance is really cool too.
You can find a romance for literally everything. And I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really neat. I appreciate that. And it tends to be, I love character driven work in general, like whether that is fiction or fantasy or whatever, you name it. Like I love character. And so with romance, it's always very character driven. So it's a very safe place, especially if you want to examine inner child stuff or like your own relationship blocks. Like it's such a good place to get through those.
It really is. I love it. It's my favorite. I have to like push myself to read. Obviously I have to read like a lot so I can make recommendations for people in the store. And I have to like push myself out of romance a lot more. But anytime it's like, I'm just reading for fun, romance is going to be what I'm going to pick up.
Question on that too. How much do you have to read to recommend to people? Because I always think about that. Like when I'm the daughter of a librarian, so I like grew up in the library, so I always was constantly reading, and my mom was just like sitting there reading too. So I always thought about that. I'm like, but bookstores is a lot more like operational, I guess.
So it's funny because like last year I read 190 some books. That includes like kids picture books. Like people, I say that number of people like, I'm like, no, that also includes like the 16-page kids picture books, but I read like 190 some books last year. So I have to read a lot. I do a lot of audiobooks. That way I can like be reading and also be doing other stuff at the same time. But yeah, I actually have, and this is a joke that we all have in the bookstore world, is like we have less time to read now than we ever did before. So I have to be very like intentional about what I choose to read. We get a lot of opportunities from authors and publishers to like read books before they come out. So that way we can know like, is this a book I'm going to want to stock? Is it a book I'm going to want to, share with my audience? And so like I have to pair like, okay, I want to read books that are getting ready to come out so I can know what I want to read, but I also need to read what's already out so I can kind of be up on my recommendations. Plus I also want to read for fun. So I read a lot, lots of reading, lots of reading, which is great because I love to do it. But yeah, I have to do it in lots of different ways because, I can do an audiobook while I'm folding laundry or making dinner and accomplishing things still be working.
So is there anything that you're currently reading right now?
Yeah, I'm reading like 9 things right now. Let's see if I can remember any of them. Let's see. What am I reading right now? You'd think I'd be better prepared for this question because people always ask me that. I'm currently obsessed with Katie Robert, who writes very spicy romance. And so I'm reading one of her books. My audiobook that I'm listening to, I just started. I'm obsessed with a particular audiobook narrator. And so every month I get my credits from Libro, which is another great alternative to Amazon.
What a great name.
So, yes, it is fabulous. And so I just started I Kissed a Girl, which is a queer romance, and she narrates it. So I was really excited about that. What else am I reading? I don't know. I have a stack. Like our coffee table at home is literally just a stack of books. And I'm just always like, I'm gonna read this one for 20 pages and then I'm gonna read something else. And yeah, I'm a mess.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's kind of mess to be. I want to be able to just dive into a world and then dive into another world.
I can't focus on just a book at a time. I can't do it. I have to like constantly be moving from one thing to another.
I love that.
I just bought a Katie Roberts book because she does the retellings of the like villain.
Yes. Wicked villains.
Yes. Okay.
So good. Yes. Neon Gods is the Dark Olympus series. And then there's a third series that's In the Whole World, which is based off of, do you remember the old movie, 7 Brides for 7 Brothers? Familiar with that? It's based off of that.
Very fuzzily, I remember.
Yes. It is wild. I just rewatched it. It's a musical from like the 50s, I think. And I was a big fan of like old musicals when I was growing up. So I own like all of them. And so I was like, oh, I'm starting this, third series by Katie Robert that's based off of 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. I want to watch this movie again. It is a wild ride. And I was like, it aged well because sometimes the old ones you're like very cringe as you're watching them. It aged well, it's still ridiculous and just out there, but 10 out of 10, definitely recommend.
Awesome.
Yeah, we've been watching a lot of nostalgic movies lately, and
Yeah.
50% of them I'm like, oh, this aged horribly. Like, what are we doing? And the
Yes.
other half I'm like, actually, this worked
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, I watched The Mummy a lot. That's my go-to kind
I
of
love The
nostalgia movie.
I love the movie.
It's fabulous.
Awesome. Well, could you tell everybody where to find you, your website, your handles, all that
Yeah.
jazz, just
Best
again,
ways to
so that they
support
know?
you and what you do. Yeah.
Yeah,
How can we
absolutely.
get
So our
involved?
website is bettiespages.com, and that's BETTIESPAGES. People always spell it with a Y. So that's like a great place where you can find our challenger shelf. We do boredom kits, which is where like I match make books for people. So if you're like in a reading slump and you don't know what to read, you just fill out a form and I pick out books for you based on your budget. All kinds of cool stuff like that is on there. TikTok is where I have a lot of fun being utterly ridiculous. So I'm Betties Pages on there, Facebook and Instagram. And then we also do this really cool art transformation project, which is really very funny because I'm so passionate about banned books. And there are people always ask me, like, is there a book that you would ban? And I go, no, there's no books that I would ban. There are plenty of books that I hate with my whole passion and cannot stand. And one of them, I decided to deconstruct and send out pages to artists. And now the artists are like turning these like hate-filled, homophobic, transphobic pages into art. And then they're sending them back to me. And so we have an Instagram where we upload those each day so people can check out the art that's been created by artists from around the world. So all of that is on our website and on social media. It's pretty cool.
What an awesome approach.
Yeah, it's so
What's
fun.
the
I love
book?
it.
I
Yeah.
need to know what the book is. I'm very intrigued.
It's
my mental
terrible.
health stuff, whenever I need a mental health break, I will look up like reviews of the worst books, like 1-star reviews, and when someone's actually read it and it tells you how bad it is, because I'm never going to read them, but it makes me feel really nice to hear other people like, and which is, yeah, so I would love
Yeah.
to know what book it is.
I don't want to tell you because I don't want to give them any publicity, but I'll message you
Yeah.
afterwards.
Okay,
Awesome.
Yep.
cool, thank you, I appreciate it,
Yep.
because I don't want to
Yeah.
give them any publicity either,
Yes.
but I'm just
They're
very
the
intrigued.
literal worst though. I hate them. It's fine. But
We
yeah, so
all
this
have
was like a
books in
great
that
way
way.
to like turn something awful into something beautiful. And I
Yeah,
love the
definitely check
power
out that
of art.
Instagram.
Awesome, thank you so much. I really love the matchmaking books idea. I think that is a really neat concept, because
I have way too much fun with it.
it's been really hard to stay out of reading slumps lately.
Yeah.
Like I can read a book, but then I'm super instantly slumped again. Even if the book wasn't the best book ever, it's just like, it's really been challenging. So I love that stopgap.
Yeah, it's been a really cool, it's been a really cool way to like connect with my customers and stuff. I started doing it because of the pandemic and I didn't have my inventory online. So it was a way for me to like sell books to people while I didn't have my inventory online. And then it's just been so popular that I just keep it up. And now my local customers can just come in and shop and get recommendations, so they don't need to do it. But I do it for people through TikTok and online. And I don't know, I have some kind of magical skills with this. It is ridiculous. I don't know how I do it. I don't know why I'm so good at it, but I literally just did one for somebody and I'd sent her Katie Roberts, the first book in the Wicked Villain series. And she messaged me and she's like, I have no idea how you knew that I have an obsession with mafia fanfic style books or like fanfic stories. And she's like, I've never told anybody that. And you sent me one. And I was like, I have skills. I don't know why. I don't know how I do it. It's just, this is my zen, my zone of genius. And I just go with it.
Sounds almost like a little divination kind of reading. I highly
Yeah.
recommend that to anybody who's just like, what's their personality like? Everybody loves that. A little like someone else's perception of their personality. And this sounds like the perfect way to dive into that feeling.
Yeah, it's super fun. I enjoy it way too much.
Awesome. Well, before we let you go, I just want to check with Krista. Is there anything big astrology coming up this week that this episode airs that we want to touch on really quick? Just so we're all updated on the energy before we sign off.
Yeah, so there is some action with Mercury, which is, of course, the speedy little planet associated with writing. Mercury will be moving into Aries on the 27th of March. And so that might bring us to wanting to read some more like blunt, possibly spicy kind of reading. So if you're looking for something to read, something that is ambitious, a little bit fiery with some of that, not not necessarily aggressive, but something where you can feel like a hero coming out of it. Sounds like a great kind of read to pick up at this time. In your everyday life, you might find that your filter between what you're thinking and what you're saying is a little bit thinner, if not maybe gone. So it's a great time to be able to take a deep breath, 1, 2, 3, before saying something, so that you can make sure you're speaking in an aligned way rather than a more reactive way. So there could be opportunities for really blunt communication to be super honest in your actions and in your words. That's fantastic as well. Venus is also going to conjoin Saturn in Aquarius. And so that's going to be helping us really establish some relationship boundaries. Maybe if you're feeling restricted in a certain relationship, or you're feeling restricted when it comes to your values, this is an opportunity to decide, if I'm feeling restricted here, how can I establish healthy boundaries that lead to what I need to feel and what I want to feel? And how are these restrictions showing me what's not working, so that I can find what will? It's also a really great time to really indulge in the feeling of being isolated. Not necessarily like being alone and abandoned, but just really enjoying your own company, which you can do while reading and with a good book. So that's a fantastic option. Reading a book, listening to music, meditating in your own space, and learning that you are whole and complete as you are, without the need of someone else to complete you. And just knowing that if you find someone else, it's really awesome to walk the path with another whole and complete person. So finding romances with really healthy romantic dynamics, where each individual gets to really stand on their own, but they come together to make this even more powerful force of love and light and all of those wonderful things that happen in romances. Just diving into your personal passions and interests, so that you can know who you are, which makes you even more magnetic to the people who are aligned to walk with you on your path. Ta-da.
That's some nice energy to round out.
And that'll
the
be on the
month. I'm-
28th of March.
I am down for that.
Right? I'm here for it.
There's more information on that in our astrology overview on the Alchemist Inkwell YouTube, but that's in the context of this. I really liked interpreting that in that light. So
One last thing I want to tell to all of our listeners, we are so thankful that you guys are here. And Krista and I are actually speaking at the Women's Indie Podcast Summit, which is on the 26th. We have been invited to record a live episode of this show during that time. So both of us have posted fun TikTok videos where you can ask us your questions. But we also have a special surprise just for our listeners. If you are a listener and you'd like to attend this live recording, or the entire event in whole, like general, the whole 3-day event that the Women's Indie Podcast Summit is, we have 10 free tickets available that we are wanting to give away. So if you want to shoot us an email at forgottenstories@gmail.com, the first 10 people that shoot us that email will get a ticket to the event from us, and we would love to have you there.
yeah, and that's forgottenstorytellers@gmail.com.
Exactly. And so, yeah, we really appreciate you guys. We wanted to do this as a gift to our listeners. Also, if you have specific questions you'd like us to talk about, we will be able to listen to that episode after the fact, even if you're not there. Go ahead and ask us those questions on either of those videos, on either of our TikToks. Mine is at Liker of Words. Krista's is at The Real KristaLyn. And you can ask us your questions there, and we will answer a couple of them during the live recording session. So super fun stuff going on over here. Well,
Awesome.
Nicole, thank you so much for being here. It was
Yeah,
such
absolutely.
a pleasure getting to chat with you and hearing your message. And
This was
it's been
great.
awesome.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for giving us empowering ways that we can make a difference in our communities, in our lives, in ourselves. It's so great to hear from you on these topics. It's awesome.
Yeah. It's been
Thank
kind of helpless feeling for a
Mhm.
while with the banned book stuff. So hearing
Yep.
how tangible and easy it can be to make a difference is awesome.
Mhm.
Awesome.
And to all our listeners, we hope you go ahead to take all of this knowledge and go make some magic. It was close.
It was perfect on mine. Are we? I swear it was really good. There's always that tension right before you have to lean in.